When Emily Rivers saw her own brother standing on her porch with a tape measure and notepad, she knew the war had begun. She watched him from the kitchen window, forehead pressed against the cool glass. Jason was wearing that shirt, the one their mother had sewn for his 40th birthday. The same one he'd worn to her funeral. He was measuring the width of the porch as if it already belonged to him. His fingers, the same ones that had crushed her dolls and torn her drawings as a child, now scribbled numbers on paper with the calm confidence of a man who'd already won. Emily didn't go out, didn't shout, didn't call the police. She simply poured herself a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened her mother's old leather journal. On the first page, in neat, familiar handwriting, it read, "If you're reading this, then everything went wrong. Forgive me, sweetheart." I believed he would change. Emily gripped the edge of the page until the paper crackled. She knew she'd be ruthless. But she didn't dream of revenge with violence. She wanted him to feel exactly what she'd felt the moment his lies stole not just her home, but the last memory she had of her mother. It all started 3 weeks earlier, on the day of the funeral. Her mother, Margaret Rivers, had died quietly, just as she'd lived. A schoolteacher. A widow. A woman with a soft voice and unshakable principles. For the past 7 years, Emily had cared for her, giving insulin shots, driving her to appointments, reading to her at night when insomnia kept her awake. Jason showed up every few months on holidays, with a bottle of wine and hollow promises to sort things out. But that day, he arrived first. He was already waiting at the lawyer's office when Emily pulled up, dressed in black, eyes swollen from crying. "Hey, sis," he said without a trace of sympathy. "Mom left a will. You're gonna be surprised." The attorney, a gray-haired man with a face carved from stone, handed her a copy. The entire estate, the house on Hazel Street, the savings account, the antique china collection, was going to Jason. Emily received only the family photo album and the gold pocket watch, the very one she herself had given her mother for her anniversary. "This is a mistake," she whispered. "She couldn't have done this." "This is Margaret's final will," the attorney said, not meeting her eyes. "Signed, witnessed, and notarized 6 months before her death." Emily didn't cry, didn't make a scene. She simply stood, nodded to her brother, whose lips twitched into a thin smile, and walked away. She didn't leave the house the first week. Didn't answer the phone. She sat by the window, sifting through memories as if searching for a crack where the lie had slipped in. And then she found it. The day her mother lay in the hospital with pneumonia, Jason had visited. Emily remembered. He brought chrysanthemums and a box of chocolates, sat by the bed, and spoke softly, almost tenderly. Her mother had smiled. A week later, she'd told Emily, "I've taken care of everything. You'll be at peace." Emily had assumed she meant the medical power of attorney, that the house would be hers. She hadn't asked for details, didn't want to upset her. Now, rereading the will for the 10th time, she noticed the line, "I leave all my property to my son Jason, as he is the only one who has cared for me in recent years." It was a lie. A cruel, calculated, despicable lie, and her mother had signed it with her own hand. But why? Emily drove to the hospital. She visited the nurse who'd cared for her mother that day. Recognizing Emily, the woman softened. "Your brother. He came several times that week. Brought paperwork. Said your mom wanted to get things in order. Once, he stayed alone with her 40 minutes. I tried to go in, but he said it was private. And then, 2 days later, she signed the documents." She looked confused, but she didn't argue. Emily thanked her and left. Her heart pounded as if trying to break free from her chest. Now she knew Jason had exploited a moment of weakness. Maybe threatened her. Maybe manipulated her. Maybe simply convinced their mother that Emily was too busy to be a real support. But it didn't matter. The will was legal. And her home, the house on Hazel Street, where she was born, where she raised her son, where her husband had died, now belonged to a man who'd never paid for a single prescription or utility bill for their mother. The second week, Emily spent at the library. She studied inheritance laws, mental capacity at the time of signing, fraud under the guise of assistance. But it was hopeless. Her mother had been lucid that day. 2 witnesses. No video. And Jason's lawyer, she discovered, was his high school friend. She sat in her car, staring at the house, her house. Jason had already started removing her belongings. Not everything, only what he deemed, without sentimental value. Her favorite rocking chair was gone yesterday. The bookshelf this morning. He wasn't rushing. He was savoring the game. And that's when Emily realized, if the law wouldn't help her, memory would. She visited her mother's old friend, Mrs. Clark, who lived in the next town over. Mrs. Clark had the key to the safe in Margaret's bedroom, the one hidden behind the painting of wild poppies. Margaret told me, if anything goes wrong, give this to Emily, Mrs. Clark said, handing her a sealed envelope. Inside was a second version of the will, signed 3 months before her death. It divided the estate equally. But below, in a handwritten addendum, it read, "If Jason attempts to contest this will or pressures me into changing it, let him inherit only debt. The house goes to Emily as it was always meant to." Emily froze. This wasn't a will. It was a confession. But not a legal one. Just a note. On ordinary paper. No notary. Yet there was another sheet in the envelope. A newspaper clipping. 15 years old. Headline, young businessman accused of real estate fraud. The photo, Jason. Younger, no gray, but with the same cold eyes. The article described how he'd convinced an elderly couple to sign documents, supposedly updating their insurance, while actually transferring their property into his name. The case was dropped due to lack of evidence. The husband died before trial. The wife retracted her statement. But the fact remained. Margaret had known. All this time, she'd known. And still gave him a chance. Emily didn't go to a lawyer. Didn't file a lawsuit. She knew even with this file, the odds were slim. Jason was wealthy, sharp, cunning. He'd find a loophole. But there was another way to get revenge. One that didn't require a courtroom. One that worked in silence. She started small. First, the neighbors. She visited each one. Didn't complain. Just said, "Mom passed. My brother took the house. I don't live there anymore." And added, as if in passing, "You remember how he came around in 2009? Tried to talk Mrs. Green into selling her lot for half price?" Then, Jason's old friends. Former business partners. His ex-wife. She didn't call. She sent letters. Anonymous. With a copy of the newspaper clipping. Next, the realtors. She called the agent handling the sale of Jason's Chicago home. "I heard there might be issues with his reputation," and never once mentioned her own name. Within 2 weeks, Jason began to unravel. He stopped showing up at Hazel Street. Called neighbors, asking if they'd seen my sister. One old partner pulled out of a joint venture. His ex-wife filed to revisit alimony, citing undisclosed income. And then, the worst thing for him. The house on Hazel Street stopped selling. Buyers came, toured it, frowned, and walked away. Then the agent called Jason and said, "People are hearing rumors about your reputation." For the first time, Jason came to Emily. Stood on the doorstep of her temporary apartment, a modest unit in an older part of town. "You did this," he demanded, fists clenched. "What exactly?" she asked calmly, holding a teacup. "I've ruined my life." "No, Jason. You ruined your own. I just reminded the world who you really are." He lunged forward, but she didn't flinch. She looked him straight in the eyes, the same eyes she'd seen as a child when he threw her doll into the bonfire. "Leave," she said. "And don't you ever come near that house again. It still remembers her. You're just a traitor." A month later, Jason took the house off the market. Hired a property manager. Moved to another state. And Emily? She didn't get the house back. Couldn't. But the new buyer made her an offer to purchase her share of the furniture, keepsakes, and garden. The offer was generous. She accepted. And bought a smaller house in the same town. With a small garden where she planted the same chrysanthemums Jason had brought to their mother that final time. Every morning, she drank coffee on the porch and thought, Revenge isn't about taking back what was stolen. Revenge is making the thief feel he is nothing, that his name is hollow, that his victory is ash. And her? She was alive. She remembered. And every day she lived was a silent tribunal. One day, her son came, brought an old, yellowed photo. In it, Emily and her mother, laughing on the porch of the Hazel Street house. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "Yes," Emily said. "But not the house. Her. And him. He's already dead to me." Real revenge isn't punishment. It's forgetting. But that night, she took out her mother's journal again. Reread that note. And at the bottom, in trembling script, added, "Forgive me, Mom. I wouldn't let him steal you twice." The next morning, she planted new flowers. Yellow. Bright. Like memories no one can erase.